Hi, I'm Harut Markarian, and this is Mobility and Inclusion, the show where we share the powerful stories of people with disabilities and daring entrepreneurs making waves in our world. From technological innovations to best practices in business, we'll learn what it really means to live in an inclusive and universally designed environment. Welcome to a new episode of Mobility and Inclusion. I am your host, Harut Markarian, and my guest today is the great David Dickson. David is a phenomenal guy. He's actually living with 3 neurological disorders: superficial siderosis, epilepsy, congenital arachnoid cyst. I don't know if I said that correctly, but he is also a personal trainer, which is very cool, and he's learning American Sign Language. Without further ado, David, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you, Harut. I appreciate that. Yeah, it's been interesting. I have 3 neurological disorders, starting with an arachnoid cyst, epilepsy, and then most recently diagnosed in 2017 was superficial siderosis, an ultra-rare neurological disorder that shares symptoms with the MS and Parkinson's. It's like a morph of the two. So I have the best of both worlds, which makes for an interesting day.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I don't know. I can only imagine. But let's start from, so you obviously weren't born with these, right?
Well, yes and no. What happened, I was born with a congenital stenosis. What stenosis is the narrowing of a passageway. And in my case, it's the narrowing of the third ventricle. Third ventricle is one of 4 ventricles in your brain to allow for the drainage of cerebral spinal fluid, CSF, out of your brain into your spinal cord, providing lubrication, a shock absorber of sorts. Stenosis is, like I said, a narrowing, a roadblock, if you will. And it's because of that roadblock that I started retaining an excessive amount of CSF. That sets in motion what is known as hydrocephalus. So I start creating this giant mass of spinal fluid in my brain. It exerts tremendous pressure on my brain, and to the point that at 10 months of age, I had a tonic-clonic seizure, formerly known as a grand mal. That had me escorted to the hospital. I was diagnosed with hydrocephalus, which was immediately identified as a critical situation, and a craniectomy was performed. There was craniotomy, which is taking a piece of the skull out to remove, say, a cancer tumor, putting it back in. And there's craniectomy, which is get in there, release pressure, drain fluid. Sometimes they put it back, sometimes they don't. My understanding with me is the piece of skull at the very base of the back of my skull, an area known as the posterior fossa, was removed. And I seen an X-ray where there's a dark space there. My current physician assistant, who I work with primarily, is saying to me that the bone had been put back. I've seen for myself in the X-rays where it appears it hasn't. He and I are actually going to have this discussion next time I see him. But the point is, they go in, they remove that piece of bone, relieve pressure and excess fluid. Then they go in and do a third ventriculotomy, which is where they drill what are known as burr holes. Typically, it's one, I feel 2 little gibbets in the top of my head. They're about the size of a dime, where they go in and drill and remove the bone, and then take a little stainless steel shaft, which in an infant is probably not more than 5 inches long, I'm guessing, and venture down into the third ventricle. And I've watched the video on YouTube. I don't know how in the world they're doing this without damaging the brain with all the blood vessels, the Charlotte's Web, if you will. They go in and they punch a hole in the floor of the third ventricle to allow sufficient drainage. There was a conversation about putting a BP shunt in place or problematic. In fact, a girl who was in the hospital during my month-long stay died from complications of a shunt. So I got incredibly lucky there. I was, like I just said, I was in the hospital for about a month. I was then released. The post-op evaluation a month or two later. I don't remember how much longer it was. It might have been 6 months. I don't know. I don't have that documentation. But according to my father, post-op eval was great, and off I went. I grew up in Florida. I was the neighborhood quarterback. I played quarterback in every single down. I lived in high school. I lived 1,000 feet from the beach. I owned a surfboard. I mean, I lived a perfectly normal childhood. I moved to Denver in July of 1994. I had gotten into the restaurant business as a food server. I was working downtown at Rooster Steakhouse, and I was a legend. I was the most famous guy in there. I could sit here and go into an hour-long conversation just based on household names like John Elway, the entire Colorado Avalanche team, the year that they won the Cup in '96. I mean, just amazing stuff. It led to a very normal, very fun life. And then in May of '98, I had gone up and spent the night with my girlfriend at the time at a bed and breakfast in the Twin Lakes area, which is just outside of Leadville. And we get down to my Ranger and we're packing up to come back to Denver. And all of a sudden I get hit with this shockwave, this electric, feeling like I've just been hit with a taser. Not that I ever have been, but feeling like it, you know? Yeah. And I'm like, what in the world was that? And she's looking at me like, what's going on with you? I'm like, I don't know. Like, that was, so I sit there and regain my composure, and we head back down to Denver. A couple weeks later, it happened again, but not as severe, but definitely an attention getter. And then going forward, I kept having these little, what I was calling anxiety attacks, that little sinking feeling in my stomach that I could have reached for my keys, because this is prior to cell phones even. I could have reached for my keys and they're not there, or you get out of your car and think you just left your keys in there. A little sinking, that like, uh-oh kind of feeling. And I wasn't understanding rocky times, girlfriend, work, all this stuff. So I didn't think about it. So that went on from May of '98 until February of '02, where I was in the gym. I was working out. My girlfriend at the time, it was like 6 o'clock in the morning, and I have that sinking feeling. Then there's another level and another level, but I get to stage 2, and I decided to go sit down and just let it pass like they always do and go about my business. And next thing you know, I wake up on a stretcher, my neck's in a brace, and I'm looking up the ceiling and I'm freaking out, like, what's going on? And I'm speaking in a language that they can't understand. I can't understand them. And they try to wheel me into an elevator feet first, and I'm like 235 pounds at the time, mostly muscle, and I throw my feet up on the door jams and I'm fighting these guys tooth and nail about getting me in an elevator and not telling me what's going on. I'm taking the University of Colorado Hospital where I'm diagnosed with epilepsy. So these anxiety attacks, as I had labeled them, were actually what are known as focal seizures, meaning focus, starting and staying in one part of my brain, whereas a tonic-clonic or grand mal, as most people know them, is something that goes global. It starts in one spot and then it evolves and encompasses the entire brain, which is what happened that morning. So I'm diagnosed as an epileptic, placed on medication, and off I ride into the sunset. I had 3 or 4 breakthrough tonic-clonic seizure. Fortunately, I was never behind the wheel of a car or out in public even. So that was good news, getting good fortune once again. And then finally, fast forward 15 years, in 2017, I said to my doctor, I go, you know what, I'm sick of being epileptic. Can we just go in and remove the piece that's malfunctioning and get rid of this? And he's like, well, we can certainly take a look and put you into a surgery workup. So the first thing they do is they put me into the epilepsy monitoring unit, EMU, and they take me off of all medications, EEG sensors all over my head, wrap it in a bandage, and then one of the first things they do is an MRI brain scan, and a part of what they got from the brain scan is an accumulation of iron deposits globally on my brain, the bulk of which are in the posterior fossa, which is again the lower rear portion of your skull, which is also home to your cerebellum, what is known as the mini brain, and they keep finding on a daily basis more and more things that it does, it controls, even emotions, what I've heard. So my cerebellum is just coated, and it's caused, I'm what's known as cerebellar ataxia, which ataxia is just a degenerative condition, and it affects coordination, balance, hearing, all these things, which are my primary symptoms. So at that point, that was 17. Part of the workup is they need to find out, am I currently bleeding? I go and have a lumbar puncture. I'm not currently bleeding. And I go through a series of tests, and we get to, would have been, took almost a year actually, till finally sit down with my neurologist. He goes, here's the situation, David. He goes, my job is to improve people's lives. He goes, at this point, there's really nothing I can do to improve your life. He goes, you're living a really good life. He goes, what we're talking about doing is you having a brain surgery where, based on the diagnostics we've received so far, you could go in and lose your ability to speak, to go from winning 90% of the time in Vegas to winning 100. He's like, does that make sense to you? Because it really doesn't to me. I'm like, absolutely not. So we tossed the brain surgery, threw it aside, and that was in the summer, would have been back down to around the summer of 18, and it wasn't, and I felt pretty normal. I had what's known as a drop foot, where occasionally, like it sounds, my right foot would drop and I'd kind of step my heel and let my toe. But I lived a pretty normal life. I've been a an avid weightlifter since 1988, and I was still in the gym, having a great time, looking and feeling great. And then in January of 19, it was actually on my daughter's 13th birthday, I had a breakthrough seizure, as they're known, a tonic-clonic seizure, and I didn't make it down to Castle Rock to see her. I ended up in University of Colorado Health Hospital for 3 days and came home. I still live alone. I'm in that good of condition, not that bad off, as it might sound. And it was about 90 days later that things really started to escalate. My speech, my gait, my walking, my balance, all these things started to really, there's a noticeable change that got my attention, but still to this day, I do live alone. I still own the gym, and my leg workouts, I put more weight on the leg press than anybody else in there. In fact, last Saturday, I had my 2 heavy sets in the leg press, or 2 sets of 8 with 838 pounds. And then nobody else in there does that. And that's kind of fun, because guys, that think they're in great shape or half my age. I have a wheelchair now, which has become my best friend. The genuine caring people that attracts, nobody talks down to me. Everybody is inspired. I hear that word all the time. You motivate me. I'm inspired by what I see you doing in here. And it's kind of fun. It's one of those things that the key to keeping a positive attitude and being happy through all of this is embracing what's taking place, the degeneration, but the fact that I'm still having the types of workouts that kids half my age will just get up and leave. That there's 2 leg press machines. We'll just get up and leave when I get in there and start really getting after it.
And I'm sure the workouts that you've been doing along your journey really helped you in staying fit, staying healthy, right? It helped your several conditions.
Oh, without question. I've had my neurologist since the beginning of time, since I was diagnosed with epilepsy, that have told me that my time in the gym has played a tremendous part in my staying healthy and my degenerative track being slower than it would be.
Yeah, it's actually very fascinating that you've had continuous challenges, but you still lived a very regular life in terms of you did play football, you did surf, right? You opened the gym, you opened businesses, you opened a restaurant, right?
Yeah.
And so a lot of people are going through depression these days, right? And most people didn't even go through half of what you went through. So what do you tell to these people like that are going through depression based on your experience, because I hear you talk and I see someone who is motivated, right? Someone who is motivated despite all the challenges that he endured along the way. So what do you say to these depressed individuals?
My favorite line is, they view your life's greatest obstacles as life's greatest motivators, your motivation. That's what happened with me as I was having my own business as a personal trainer. I was focused on the deaf and hard of hearing community because I was learning American Sign Language. And I've never, ever, after being in a gym since 1988, I have never seen any 2 people communicating with sign language. And I'm like, what a great niche to learn sign language and be someone who offered that as a trainer.
Yeah.
Well, it didn't work out that way. I had one client, and we started in January of 19, and then the gym where I was training out of just up and closed their doors May 1st. And at that point, I had reached just a level of frustration and just said, you know what? A big problem that I was having as a trainer, I was trying to hide it. Fear that gym owners would view me as a liability, and fear that the average person would see me, lose my balance, stumble, my hands shake.
Actually,
tremors.
that's a very good point. I wanna cut you off here a little bit, just because I want to touch on this point. Like you said, gym owners and potential employers, right, would have this preconceived opinion about you without even letting you tell them or show them what you can and cannot do, right? So
yeah,
how do you address that?
Well, the way to address that is go like I've done, go and start your own company, get your own insurance. I have an insurance policy for me and my company, and then go and find a gym that allows contract trainers. So I go in there and run my business with my own insurance out of their gym, and then my client signs a waiver that doesn't hold me responsible, that they understand that there's a potential for injury in personal training, and then they sign a duplicate waiver directed at the gym, recognizing
that's
the
actually
fact
very good. Like you said, right? If people or employers in this case are not giving you the opportunity, one of the ways is to create your own opportunity and start your own business.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, and I'm really glad. I'm really glad actually we're talking about this. So I have a huge entrepreneurial heart and mind. So this is a really crucial point, because a lot of people would have acted on what others have told them in terms of their abilities or disabilities, whether or not they can pursue something, right? And that will be a limiting factor in their progress or in their in the dream they have in pursuing their ultimate or ideal situation. So they quit based on what other people tell them, right? And what I like about you is that, okay, you listen to what they had to say, even though what they had to say was not really smart or was not even an educated or a mature conversation that can be had between a potential employer and an employee. Meaning, I'm presenting myself as an employee to you, instead of you having some type of an idea of what I can and cannot do. You should let me show you showcase what I can and cannot do. And based on that, you make a decision, not based on what you think I can do or not. Right? So go ahead.
I was told, I interviewed with a gentleman who owned a gym, and it went great. He a quick quiz, ran through some questions. What are the muscles of the rotator cuff? All these things, and I knew it, point blank, very technical. And he was really impressed. And I said to him at the end, I go, all right, I'm very transparent, very honest person. Let me share with you what's going on. Because I knew it would be obvious when I got in there, the balance, the tremors, the hard hearing. And I opened up and shared with him what's going on. And by the time that was over, he's like, because you know what, he goes, I just can't hire you. You represent a liability to my company.
Or isn't
And
that against the law in one way or another? That should be against the law.
and you know what? Now the ADA, I think that is true. I which I didn't know at the time.
Yeah.
But I think you're right. You
Yeah,
can't
I mean,
deny somebody. You can't deny employment because of a disability.
exactly. Yeah, I mean, if and I'm not 100% positive that it is against the law, but if it's not, and then it should be. That's all I'm saying. But but you know that because I actually the book that I wrote about a year ago, Mobility and Inclusion, I specifically talk about inclusion in the term that, you know, allow everyone to play the game, right? Allow everyone to play the game and don't have predetermined or conception of what someone can or cannot do without them telling you or showing you what they're capable of, right?
Right.
And that's something I discuss in the book. That's something I've discussed with other guests on my podcast, and the other guests that came on told me several times that they were denied employment because of their physical appearance, right?
Right. And that, my friend, is the book that I want to read.
Yeah, so anyone who wants to read the book, Mobility and Inclusion, you can find it on Amazon. It's a very short read, very easy read, and you know, I think there's a lot of value to, you know, to just the information that is in there, because I talk about all the major topics that surrounds accessibility, universal design, inclusion, and you know, I even talk about inclusion in Hollywood, how Hollywood is segregating and, you know, discriminating against people with disabilities. So it's a very short and informative book. But coming back to you, so you went through all these procedures, all these surgeries, right? And these surgeries.
I actually had one surgery and another procedure, quote unquote, the Weta procedure, which is where they take a wire, insert it in your groin artery, run that wire all the way up through your body. I believe it travels through your heart. The radiologist mentioned that there was very little plaque, that my heart was in great condition. Mm-hmm. And then they get up into the base of your skull, and they're able to anesthetize your your brain by individual hemispheres. So they go in there and they numb the right side, the right hemisphere, and they slide me out from underneath the X-ray machine. I've got a hold of my nose, fingers in this hand, speech pathologist, fingers in this hand, and they're testing for motor skills, you know, squeeze my hand. Then they're showing me flashcards, numbers, pictures, ask me to say words like Presbyterian, I mean, all these crazy words, trying to decide or figure out which side of my brain controls my hand, motor skills, memory, speech, all these different things. And my speech pathologist, who I saw a few weeks later, saw me. She goes, "Oh my God, David." She goes, "I absolutely love being there with you that day." She goes, "When most people, so often I see people just freak out or start bawling, crying." She goes, "If you didn't know or couldn't say it or do it," she goes, "you would just start laughing." She goes, "It was so much fun."
No, that's so. But, the point I was, that's. I mean, those are very challenging, both on you and on the operation, right? Those are very challenging, and they take a toll on the body at one point, I assume. But how was, you know, if we talk about the surgery and the procedure and everything that you had to do for your well-being, all this, you know, required money, right? And required, you know, someone paid for this, right?
Yeah, well, currently, I qualify because I'm self-employed. It's a startup business. I'm not technically making any money. I've been on SSDI since late 2018, and I've whittled my cost of living down to the point that I can actually survive on SSDI. I don't have a car payment, drive an older car, and I basically I pay for my food, my rent, whatnot, but all my medical expenses are being paid for by Medicare and Medicaid. Because I'm disabled, I qualify for Medicare at 52 years old.
Yeah, I wanted to really touch on that because that's also crucial information. People in your situation might wonder how they can afford the surgeries or the operations or the healthcare that they deserve to get, right? So that's something important that people need to know.
And I have a document that I will share with you, created by Rory, superficial sclerosis. I'm maybe two of you spoke, yep. But she's created a document on the bullet points of how to get approved for SSDI in a time, just to get approved point blank, and then to do so in a timely fashion, whereas 90+% of people who apply are denied the first try, and then it can take several months or a year or more to actually get approved. And she's gone in and got it mapped out, and it works.
Oh, that's awesome! Thank you for offering that. I would love to have that document so we can share with anyone who's interested in knowing how to go through the proper steps.
I'll email it to you after we're done here.
Awesome, man. So let's talk about your gym business now. So who are your target customers?
I'm sorry?
Who are your target customers? Talking about your gym and your business.
My focus is I live in a body that shares numerous symptoms with MS patients and Parkinson's disease patients. If you go and look at a list of their symptoms and then the list of my symptoms, it's like I share some of both, the best of both worlds. So what I'm really focused on is reaching out to those demographics, just people who are living in a body, or more importantly, that I'm living in a body is incredibly similar to theirs.
Yep.
And I'm doing it with such great success. But then I can bring them in and show them a paradigm, a routine, how to perform exercises with the same systems, the balance issues, the tremors, whatnot. And there's an immediate bond there, as you can imagine, where they're like, oh, wow, David is shaking. I've seen him stumble a couple of times. He's living in a body very much like mine. His speech slurs on occasion, but he's in such amazing shape. And that's kind of my tagline for my business, seeing is believing. But like you pointed out earlier, my having gone into this after working out since 1988, I kind of had a head start on a little bit. And working out like I do is helping to keep things in check that the average person may not have. But that's, to answer your question, I'm kind of wandering off track. To answer your question, I'm targeting people like me, typically MS and PD.
That's great. So anybody who, and are you doing online training as well? So maybe you can reach a wider audience.
I'm not, because I don't have the tools necessary. I need to have people. I just would be out of my element, and I wouldn't have the things the machines, the dumbbells, some of the tools that I would need to be successful. And I just would be out of my element and you'd be able to feel it, see it. However, what did happen, I went to a restaurant called Game Train this past Tuesday to talk about doing a fundraiser for SSRA, and went from me thinking I was going to come in and do an event for an evening, and they're like, oh, November's booked, but December's open. Let's put you in here all of December, and we'll help create an event month long. And I'm like just blown away. But then that's the SSRA, and Garrett, the event manager, goes, now let's talk about Never Surrender. He goes, let's do an event for Never Surrender in the next week or two outside before it gets cold. And I always said that I can't do a class, it doesn't work for me. He goes, I go, I need a wall, all this stuff. He goes, well, no, come here. So we'll go outside, and there's this beautiful, smooth brick wall, painted red, running down the east side of the building, and there's parking spaces right in front of me, nice flat surface. So I can be against the wall using it as a stabilizer. And then I just had the thought last night of people who need stabilization can't be alongside the wall next to me. They need to be in front of me, parking cars parallel to the wall so they can back against the car or vehicles, whatever they might be, and use them as stabilization tools. And everyone then be facing me.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's great. And I'm glad you're, you're attending that event and they found you a time in December. So in closing, what do you want to say to everybody that is hearing you talk, listening to you? What motivational statement do you want to leave them with?
Again, make your life's greatest obstacles your greatest motivations. That's what I did. I finally said in May of 2019, when that gym closed down, I stopped trying to hide my SS and just said, you know what, I'm done hiding it. I'm going to embrace it. I'm going to show it off, and I'm all for it. I'm just going to make this my motivation in life, and here I am. That's
great, man. And you're a living embodiment of that statement. Allow your greatest obstacles be your greatest motivation. I love it.
Absolutely.
All right. Thank you very much, Dave. It was a pleasure having you on. We will be in contact, of course, and we will see you soon.
Yeah, pleasure being here. Thank you.
All right. Bye-bye.